नमस्कार, वेलकम टू RCI's नवशिखर चैनल। भारतीय पुनर्वास परिषद के इस नवशिखर चैनल में आप सबका स्वागत है। आज हमारी जो टेलीकॉन्फ्रेंस की टॉपिक है, आपने देखा हुआ होगा अपने स्क्रीन पे, ये है असिस्टिव डिवाइसेस इन द फील्ड ऑफ लोकोमोटर इम्पेयरमेंट एंड सेरेब्रल पॉल्सी। हमारी आज की सेशन हम दो भाग में करेंगे। हम पहले असिस्टिव डिवाइसेस फॉर लोकोमोटर इम्पेयरमेंट डिस्कस करेंगे, उसके बाद वी विल टॉक अबाउट असिस्टिव डिवाइसेस इन द फील्ड ऑफ cerebral palsy. We have in our studios eminent experts who will be taking you through this discussion on these topics. I'd like to introduce to you our experts who are here today. Dr. Dharmendra Kumar probably needs very little introduction to most of you. He is the director of the Pandit Deen Dayal Upadhyay Institute for the Physically Handicapped in Delhi, which is a national institute of our ministry. Dr. Dharmendra Kumar has an interesting background in the sense that he is an orthopedic surgeon by training and by profession, but he has come into the field of disability. He has specialized in the area of physical medicine and rehabilitation. He's been actively involved with the running of the Nirtar in Cuttack in Orissa, which is another national institute, and is currently heading IPH, as it's commonly known, in Delhi. An interesting thing about Dr. Dharmendra Kumar is that his area of specialization or interests really are in the field of poliomyelitis, corrective surgeries. He used limb salvage surgeries, he said, in tumor cases, for spinal injury patients, and also in the area of cerebral palsy. He's particularly interested in barrier-free access also. He teaches at the institute at various levels and has guided many dissertations and theses and contributed chapters on topics related to locomotor impairment in various textbooks as well. We also have in our studios two other colleagues, friends, who Ujjwala Shankar is the program manager at ADI and is a developmental therapist by training, and has more than 20 years of experience working at ADI, which used to be known as the Spastic Society of Northern India in the past and is now known as ADI, which is an acronym for Action for Ability, Development and Inclusion. Ujjwala has worked extensively in the area of early intervention with children with cerebral palsy and other disabilities. So this is particularly working with very young babies, and also manages the outstation program, which is a very successful program for intervention for children who come from all over the northern region to ADI. Mridu Bhatia is also a development therapist at ADI and is actively involved in the early intervention program there, and also works at the child development clinics that ADI helps run at All India Institute of Medical Sciences and Lok Nayak Hospital. So without any further ado, I would like to hand you over first to Dr. Dharmendra Kumar ji for his session on assistive devices for persons with locomotor impairment. Sir.
धन्यवाद केतकी जी. Audience, today we are going to talk about the assistive devices which are used for the locomotor impairment cases. Well, before we go ahead with the topic, we should let us recapitulate what disability exactly is. Then only we will be able to understand the assistive devices which can be used for them. Well, if you go with the definition of disability, it's a difficulty in performing certain activities which are essential basic components of daily living. And those daily living components of everyone's life are like self-care activities, transfer and mobility activities, household activities, job activities and communications. Means the activities which a person is doing right from getting up from the bed till the time he goes back to the bed to sleep. So those are the activities, and if they are affected, that means the person is having some kind of the disability. Well, if you go by the definition which is given in the Persons with Disability Act, according to that, the disability includes blindness, low vision, leprosy cured, hearing impairment, locomotor disability, mental retardation, and mental illness. Well, if you go to the definition of locomotor disability, summarily, if you want to define it, it's the disability of bones, joints, or muscles leading to substantial restriction of movement of limbs or any form of cerebral palsy. This is the definition which has been adopted in Persons with Disability Act 1995. But if you go by the definition which is practically being used, that means inability to do or to execute certain distinctive functions or activities associated with moving both himself and objects from one place to another, or such inability which is resulting from affliction of either muscular system, skeletal system, or nervous system, or you can say neuromusculoskeletal system. That means if a person is not able to move himself, or if the person is not able to move the objects, that means that person is having one or other kind of the locomotor disability. That is the definition. Well, if you go to the magnitude of the problem, if you see the total number of disabled persons according to National Sample Survey Organization's report is 184.9 lakhs total number of disabled persons in India, and if you see the locomotor disability, it is 106.34 lakhs. That means this is one of the most common disability which is found in our country. Well, if you see the magnitude from the point of view of percentage of the population, the total percentage of the disabled population in our country according to NSSO report is 1.8%. Whereas the locomotor disability, as is evident on the slide, is 1.06 crores, or you can say 106 crores. That is 57.5% of the total disabled population. And to add to that, not only the locomotor impaired persons, those who have got difficulties, the other category of the people who can use locomotor assistive devices can be the elderly people, who are about 7% of the total population. Well, if you see a per thousand distribution of persons with disabilities and those who can use the aids and appliances per thousand people, you can say 170 people per thousand on an average require one kind of aids or appliances to use to do the activities of daily living or to take care of themselves. But there is a good number, although, that who do not require any kind of aids and appliances, but even then there are some people who cannot take self-care even with aids and appliances. Means this is, if you by an average, if you see the number, that means nearly 300 people per thousand population of disabled persons require one assistive device or the other to take care of themselves, and maybe even after using the aids and appliances they may be requiring the assistance of some person. Well, if you see why the persons with locomotor disabilities they require assistive devices, if you go by the classification or the presentation, how do they present themselves? There can be only one limb involved, there can be both the lower limbs involved or one lower limb involved, there can be both lower limbs involved, or there can be all the four limbs involved, or there can be only trunk affected. Or you can say if neurologically affection is there, the person may be having monoplegia. Monoplegia means only one limb is involved, or the weakness is pertaining to only one limb. It can be either one upper limb or one lower limb. If there is involvement of one half of the body, or you can say one upper limb and one lower limb, the condition is called as hemiplegia or hemiparesis. Whereas if both lower limbs are involved, that means the person is having either paraplegia, both lower limbs involved. If all the four limbs are involved, the condition is called as quadriplegia. if the other way in which the locomotor disabled person can present themselves can be the amputation. That means loss of part of the body. It can be either pertaining to either upper limb or lower limb. Then there can be the presentation in the form of deformities in either of the limbs, or there can be certain associated problems, because the disability may not be confined to limb alone, or there cannot be only deformity or amputation. There can be associated problems like there can be pain which is associated with number of conditions. Then there can be spasticity, or you can say tightness in the limbs. Then there can be stiffness. Stiffness means there is difference between spasticity and stiffness, is that stiffness, it is difficult to move the limb. In spasticity, if the spasticity is reduced by one maneuver or the other, the limb can be moved. There can be associated sensory loss, like in the cases of paraplegia. You must have seen the cases of traumatic paraplegia, those who have got loss of sensations in their lower limbs as well, whereas they have, along with the paralysis in the both lower limbs. Then there can be bladder and bowel involvement, or there can be associated incontinence or constipation problems or retention of urine problems in these cases, particularly in the cases of like meningomyelocele, operated meningomyelocele cases. It can be there in the cases like the traumatic paraplegia cases, where there can be associated bowel and bladder problems. Then there can be other associated impairments which can be there along with the existing, or you can say existing disability, like there can be mental retardation associated with cerebral palsy. There can be speech and hearing impairment associated with cerebral palsy or other conditions, like in hemiparesis also. If there is a stroke case which is resulting into hemiparesis, a speech problem can be associated with that. Then there can be associated visual impairment in the form of blindness, or it can be in the form of low vision. Well, if you go further with the functional point of view, the disabled person can be independent, means he may not be requiring help from others. There can be those who can be partially independent, means they will be requiring little help from the others. Then they can be partially dependent, means for largely they will be requiring help from others. Then there can be totally dependent, means those who are totally dependent for their activities of daily living. So they will be requiring help from other people to take care of themselves full time, almost full time requirement will be there. Well, if you see the classification of according to the devices they are using, persons with the locomotor impairments, they can be cane users, means they will be using the cane to walk about. Then there can be crutch users who will be using crutches. The crutches can be any type. It can be auxiliary, or it can be elbow crutch or gutter crutch, whatever. They can be crutch users who will be requiring the assistance of crutches to walk about. Then there can be the walker users, means those who use walker to make themselves mobile or to stand up. Then there can be cases who will be using calipers. Then there can be prosthesis users, those who are using artificial limbs to replace the lost part. Then there can be who are using wheelchairs to make themselves mobile, means for mobility activities. Then there can be tricycle users for those particularly those who are using tricycle for long distance ambulation.
I'd just like to take a moment to make an announcement. Actually मुझे पहले करना चाहिए था. हम दर्शकों को बता दें कि as of today we now have a toll-free number which you can call at the studio and ask questions directly to the experts who are and teleconference with them, the real sense of intention of our programs. So kindly note our numbers. We'll be scrolling them on your screen also. You can call toll free from wherever you are in the country at 1-800-11-2008. Our earlier number 265-11613 continues to be available as well, and our fax number 265-11609 is also available. So May I request viewers who are watching this program that if they wish to ask questions and if they wish to interact with the speakers, they can call at these numbers which are being now continually scrolled at the bottom of your television screen also. Thank you. Sir, please continue.
Yeah, so I was talking about the classification of persons with disabilities or persons with locomotor impairments according to the appliances they use, and they can be completely dependent, they can be partially dependent, they can be partially independent, or they can be totally independent, means depending upon the assistance they require from others along with assistive devices to do their activities of daily living. Then other can be that those who are able to move about, we call them as ambulant persons, and then those who are using wheelchairs, we call them as wheelchair users. Well, as far as the use of assistive devices is concerned, means it's required, of course, for the activities of daily living, for performing them, and other things which will be required to make a person reach the spots of their activities is the need of the hour, is the barrier free or accessible environment, which is basically is the creation and maintenance of an environment in which people can participate in equitable and dignified way. Means it should not be that some person, if he is going to some office, he should be lifted or he should be this thing. He should be able to move inside the campus in a dignified way, independently, and then there should be the environment should be such that it maximizes the independence of that person. Thus he can move in with his dignity, and then it should conserve energy, it should not be exhausting, and then it should ensure safety, and at the same time this should be environment, accessible environment. It should be affordable, means it should be designed in such a way that much of the cost factor can be taken care of. Then I'm just touching on the accessible environment, means it can be of two types, like internal built environment, which we have to look into. It can be like the person's own home, or it can be the schools, colleges, it can be sports complexes, theaters, hotels, workplaces, building, or the public buildings. Means this is the internal built environment where you have to have ramps, or you have to have the lifts. Thus the person with disability can move in again and can access any floor of that building easily, and can reach up to the spot of his activity or wherever he has got a work to do. So he should be in a position to reach that place. So that should be the qualities of the internal environment. Then there are the external environment, which constitute basically the walkways, means the environment which is outside, where a person has to move or has to reach places through that particular environment. It includes basically the walkways or the footpaths, roads, zebra crossing, traffic signals, playgrounds, parks, and not only roads, it can be even waterways or airways, means wherever a person has to go for activities or to reach places, those constitute basically the external environment, and these should be accessible to the persons with disabilities. They can move in or move with it.
Traffic, modes of traffic also, different modes of transport and traffic.
Yeah, different modes of transport. Waterways also, means if somebody has to move through the ships or through the waterways, the ship should be accessible to the person with disability. That is. Well, if you look at the aids and appliances which are basically used for persons with disabilities, it can be orthotic devices, it can be prosthetic devices, it can be mobility aids, it can be appliances used in activities of daily living, means it can be broadly classified into four groups. If you see the orthotic devices, it's basically the word has derived from the word orthosis, means orthos and ticks. It's from the Greek word. Orthos means straight, and then appliance which can be used to a person to enable to allow him to use better way that particular body part to which it has been fitted. Means orthosis is basically means orthos means straight, means initially the orthotic appliances were being used to straighten the parts of the deformed body, deformed parts, and that's why the word orthotics was given to it. And it's basically are being used for upper extremity, lower extremity, or spinal spinal system, or you can say spine. Then the main purpose of applying an orthosis to the body is basically prevention and correction of the deformity. Means if there is some deformity going to happen, it can be prevented if the aids and appliances are fitted early. But if already some deformities happened, the deformity can also be corrected with the help of orthotics. Then it is applied to relieve the pain also. Then immobilization and protection of that particular body part. Then reduction of axial load sometimes is required, like in the cases of paraplegia, or you can say even cases of poliomyelitis, where the limb cannot bear full weight. So the axial loading can be reduced on the limb, and the limb can bear weight through the caliper, or you can say the orthotic device. Then if for the sake of improvement of function also, the orthotic devices can be used. Well, the upper extremity orthosis basically includes the splints, or you can say the wrist hand orthosis, or can be braces also. So the splints, as far as are concerned, or wrist hand orthosis are concerned, they are basically can be of two types: static and dynamic. Static is used for when you have to give rest to that body part, or to that limb, or you have to prevent the deformity. In those cases you use static kind of splints. Like you can have finger splints, you can have wrist hand immobilizers, or you can have aeroplane splints for the whole upper extremity, in which even the shoulder, elbow, wrist and hand part all can be mobilized. That is called as an aeroplane splint. Then there are dynamic splints, in which the basically is to give functions, or you can say it allows the body part to function at the same time when it is being applied, or it is for the correction of deformity as well as for prevention of deformity. Means while you are preventing and correcting the deformity, at the same time you are allowing the body part to function. So in those cases you use dynamic splints, and they can be like hand splints, can be like knuckle bender splints, which is used in the cases of claw hand deformities. Then you have wrist hand orthosis with extensor assist in the cases of you can say radial palsy, in which you have wrist drop or wrist drop deformity kind of a thing. Then there are braces, which are particularly used in the cases where the bone is unstable or it is not united, or in those cases you use braces to basically to support the limb, thus it can be used functionally.
So would braces and gaiters be the same, fall in the same category, for instance?
Yeah, gaiter is one kind of brace for the lower limb, you can say in that way. Well, lower limb orthosis, if you see, are basically in colloquial terms nowadays, you can say, are called as calipers. And if you go by latest nomenclature, they are called as ankle foot orthosis, knee ankle foot orthosis, or hip knee ankle foot orthosis, depending upon the extent to which the caliper is being used. There can be then other orthosis like knee cages, there can be gaiters, there can be braces. Then surgical or modified boots can also be are also categorized in the lower extremity orthosis. Well, I will just would like to give you certain examples, like knee ankle foot orthosis, and on the right you can see hip knee ankle foot orthosis. The difference can easily be perceived that knee ankle foot orthosis basically covers the knee joint, and there is one thigh cup which is tied to the thigh. Then in the case of hip knee ankle foot orthosis, there is one joint, additional joint at the hip, and apart from that there is one pelvic belt which is tied to make the caliper stable and then allow movements at the hip joint, and it supports the hip joint. Particularly hip, ankle, foot orthoses are used in the cases where the limbs are flail, or you can say the body weight is to be borne by the ischial tuberosity, or you can say the limb weight is to be transferred through some bony prominence. That's why hip, knee, ankle, foot orthosis is being used, where the hip is particularly unstable. Well, on the left you can say ankle foot orthosis. It's a plastic ankle foot orthosis because there are a number of materials nowadays which are being used for fabricating the aids and appliances. So it is a polypropylene ankle foot orthosis. Then in some of the cases where the foot is deformed and because of deformity in the foot, the weight bearing problems happen and the person is unable to walk. In such cases, to relieve pain as well as to change the weight bearing lines, modified or surgical boots are used for such cases. Well, in spinal orthosis are the ones which are used to support the spinal column, or you can say to correct the deformities of the spine. Like you can see the cervical collars, which are often used by the people who are having. Commonly, you must have seen some people going with the collar around their neck. It is most of the cases it is the soft cervical collar which is applied to support the neck as well as to restrict the movement to some extent. So cervical collars can be used. Then there can be hard cervical collars when there is some injury to the cervical spine. In such cases, the hard cervical collar is used. Then there are further 4-post brace, or you can say SOMI brace, which can be used to support the cervical spine. In those cases where the cervical spine is injured and there is instability in the cervical spine, where the neck movements have to be restricted completely till the time the healing has happened. So in such cases you can say use either 4-post collar or 4-post brace or SOMI brace, sterno-occipitomandibular immobilizer brace, you can say. Then there can be jackets. Jackets are basically used for the trunk, or you can say the correction of deformity in thoracic and the lumbar spine. So for those cases the jackets are used. Then there are braces. Braces can be thoraco-lumbosacral orthosis, or there can be lumbosacral orthosis. Means they can be in the form of supporting either the dorsal spine or the lumbar spine, or both of them can be mobilized with the help of these orthoses. And these are used if they are rigid variety, that means rigid varieties are being used in the cases where immobilization is required for a longer time, whereas the soft ones are used maybe in the form of say braces or maybe in the form of corsets. They are used basically to support the temporary immobilization. So like in the low backache cases where the lumbar spine is to be immobilized for some time, or maybe while the person is walking at that time, or when the person is sitting for longer time, lumbosacral orthosis can be used. Well, in the spinal orthosis, I have given 2 examples you can see on the screen now. One is the SOMI, or you can say sterno-occipitomandibular immobilizing brace. And then on the right you can say ASH brace, or you can say anterior spinal hyperextension brace, which is used in the cases of particularly the lumbar and lower dorsal spine injury. Well, when we talk about orthosis, it is important that the person who is using knows how to take care of it. Otherwise, what happens is there can be wears and tears, and if it is not being used properly, then there can be problems in it. So the one has to take care when it is being used. So the important things about this, I would like to tell the audience and viewers how to take care of the orthosis. It can be like check the moving joints off and on, means continuously you have to keep checking it whether the joint is moving or not, because there are certain areas when a caliper is particularly being used, certain rivets may fail, and if the joint if it is not moving properly, it will put extra stress on the body to move about. So to conserve energy, it is important, and to have a near normal gait or near normal walking pattern, it is important that the joints are checked time to time. Then at the same time check all the screws, nuts and bolts every day, means you have to check them keep checking them, because if there is one screw which has fallen, that means the person will become amenable to injury, because it can be a mechanical failure and the person may fall and may sustain injuries. Then the orthosis should be cleaned every day, or if possible, if not possible every day, at least once a week it should be cleaned. Then it should be the leather part should always be kept clean and dry, because if there is moisture on the leather part, it basically attracts fungal, and if there is a fungus on the leather part, it can lead to fungal infection of the skin, because it most of the time remains in contact with the skin. Then you have to polish the shoe every day, means every day you should clean and keep it dry and then polish the shoes, because shoe component of any caliper or processes is very important, because that is the part which bears the maximum weight. So it has to be taken care of, and if there is wear in the shoe, it should be repaired immediately. Then keep the caliper away from water and mud, because if the mud and water is there, once again it can damage the caliper. Then oil all the joints of caliper once a week with machine or mobile oil. That should be done. And then remove caliper while sleeping, means during sleeping, until and unless it is being prescribed by the competent person. It should not be worn at the night. Of course, there are certain calipers, or you can say certain orthoses, which are used particularly for correction of the deformities, are allowed to be used during night also, but not all the calipers and the same. For the calipers or the orthotic devices which are used for walking should be removed when a person is sleeping, because during sleep, injury or some body part may get compressed and some neural injury can happen to the body. Then clean the padding sites with wet clothes and dry it and apply the talcum powder, because that gives basically the time for the orthosis to breathe. So it should be cleaned with wet cloth, thus it can clean the dust, then dry it and then apply talcum powder to it. Well, the other devices which are used for persons with locomotor impairment can be the prosthetic devices, and the prosthetic devices has once again derived from the Greek word. Pros means in addition to, tithani means to put, and tix means it's a systemic pursuit. That means a systemic pursuit of putting in addition to, that is called as prosthetics. That means it is a device which is used to replace the lost part of the body. Well, if you look at the prosthetic devices, the major or you can say broad way you can classify them in broadly, like in the internal prosthetic devices and external prosthetic devices. Internal prosthetic devices are the ones which are used inside the body, and they are like the joints which are used to replace the hip joint. Means total hip replacement, the processes which is used to replace the hip joint is called a total hip replacement process. It's an internal processes. Then total hip replacement and total knee replacement processes also you can say, and the heart valves are also replaced. So if the process is being used to replace the lost part of the body, or after, in some of the cases when the disease part is removed, it is replaced by a processes. It can be internal processes if it is being used inside the body. Well, for the external processes are the ones which are fitted outside the body, and most of the time it is used to replace the missing part of the limb. It can be upper limb processes or lower limb processes. Well, you can say the external or processes can further be divided into two types, like exoskeletal and endoskeletal. Exoskeletons are the ones in which some skeleton is produced outside, means a outer covering is there, hard covering is there, which is basically used to replace the lost part. And whereas in endoskeletal processes there is one central you can say skeleton, over which the outer body part is this thing shell is made. That means it is endoskeletal, means it is like using the principle of natural limb, means inside you have got bone, or inside you have got hard part and outside you have got soft part. That's why it is called as endoskeletal processes. Well, then further the processes can be where it is being used, like in upper extremity prosthesis, it can be replacing the fingers, then it is called finger prosthesis. Or when sometimes when the whole hand is amputated, or when whole hand is lost, in such cases sometimes it is the cosmetic gloves which is being used, because when it is not being used for functional purposes and it is being used for cosmetic purposes, then the cosmetic gloves gives a natural look and person can feel happy by projecting himself as if he has got a normal limb. Then there can be wrist disarticulation processes where the hand is amputated at the level of wrist. Then there can be below elbow, or it can be above elbow, or it can be shoulder articulation processes, depending upon from where the limb has been amputated or from where the limb has been lost. So according to the use, it is being named. Then depending further upon the way it is being used to function, means if it is a mechanical force, it is called as mechanical processes. If some electrical force is being used to move the you can say the terminal end of the processes, or you can say the hand unit of the processes, or sometimes even the joint can be moved with the help of electrical force or electrical current, so it can be called as electrical processes. Then it can be myoelectric when the signals to move the electrical part of the processes, the muscle is being used for that purpose to generate or to give the signal from. So then it is called as myoelectric processes.
Could you just explain this myoelectrical process a little?
Yeah, what happens is myoelectric processes is that the sensors are put, means over the say you can say for example in below elbow processes. In below elbow process, what happens is the sensors are put around the arm, means at the flexure aspect of the limb. That means at the biceps. Then when person has to move the limb, means the terminal device, there is one electrical motor which is placed in the forearm component of the processes. As soon as the signal goes, the sensation goes. That means person has to give signal. He has to just contract the biceps muscles, and when he contracts the biceps muscles, the signal goes to the electrical part. The motor moves, and then the terminal device part opens or closes. That depends on the whether it is voluntary opening or voluntary closing. Yeah, that depends on the terminal device.
Okay.
If it is this thing, you can say voluntary opening. The moment you move the biceps muscle, the signal will go and it will start opening.
Okay.
And once the person start relaxing, it will start closing. It's like this. So myoelectric processes.
So these devices of this kind, are they easily available in our country, for instance?
No, not very easily. Most of them are imported.
I see.
And the thing is, we are developing in India, and it is still under you must say the investigation, practical use. Trials are going on.
I see.
People have developed in India also, and it is quite cheaper. But the thing is that Indian scenario in a way is not very say suitable for the myoelectric processes. The reason being, we are living in a hot climate, you can say temperate climate, in which the temperature goes quite high. Then the sensor and this thing, the interface between sensor and the body part, sometimes it is the sweat may be there. So sweating may disrupt the functioning of myoelectric processes. So it's not, whereas in cold climate it is very suitable, because there is no such kind of the interference when the myoelectric process is being used.
Okay.
And one thing more I would like to add here is that myoelectric processes gives very good results if it is used in children, particularly somewhere around the age of 12 or 15 years of age, if amputation is at that age. So the results are very good in children, because they can learn and adapt to it faster.
Okay.
Whereas in adult it becomes at times difficult to operate, because certain maneuvers are required. You have to open with a particular you can say movement of this muscle.
Yes.
So those muscles need to be trained, and training is easier in children. That's why the results are better.
Okay.
Well, in lower extremity processes, once again the same principle applies here. The part of body which is lost, and it is replacing that part, according to that only it is named. Like partial foot processes, or you can say shoe fillers, Then it can be below knee processes, it can be knee disarticulation processes, above knee processes, or hip disarticulation processes, like that. Well, once again, this can be exoskeletal or endoskeletal. On the screen, of course, you can see one below knee processes, which is endoskeletal processes, whereas on the right side of the screen, you can say above knee processes. And above knee process, this is exoskeletal type, and you can see if it is say above knee processes, if the stump is small or this thing, the ischial weight bearing is required, and at the same time we have to give one hip joint and pelvic belt to sustain the process, thus it does not fall off from the body. So for that point of view. Then once again, the principle applies to the orthosis, it applies to the care of prosthesis also. Means the cleaning of prosthesis is very much required. Care of prosthesis, if not taken properly, it can result into infection of the part on which it is being used, or it can even injure that particular part. So it should be cleaned. The socket is the one of the most important part of the prosthesis, because it is constantly in touch with the body. So it has to be especially taken care of. So the socket should be cleaned with the mild soap, and then it should be dried thoroughly. And then of course some stocking should be used along with this. And then the protective coating should be there to avoid damage to the wooden parts. Then knee friction mechanism need to be adjusted regularly, particularly in the cases who are using above knee processes. If knee friction mechanism is not being used, the person may fall and sustain injury. And then keep the foot piece and shoe dry.
What can you just explain this thing about a knee friction mechanism? What exactly do you mean by that?
See, knee friction mechanism is of basically different types, and if the friction mechanism is not proper, when the person is walking, and particularly when the person is getting downstairs, there is a tendency of the body weight to shift behind the knee. When the person is walking, basically in normal circumstances, the body weight passes just in front of patella, so it locks the knee, right? If the friction mechanism is not proper, what will happen is the limb will give way. That means the knee will get flexed and person will fall down.
Oh, I see.
That is it. Then always dry other parts also if they become wet, and repair the soles, because as I told you, if the shoe part is worn unevenly, it will lead to the uneven gait, or the pressure areas will get formed in the processes that they will damage the stump.
These prosthetic devices are really like an extension of the body.
Yeah,
so to that extent, look, the care of them is as important as
taking care of your own
body.
Body part. Absolutely. That's right. Because lower limb, the limb is the one which bears the body weight, and it bears the pressures. Yeah. So if there is uneven pressure on any part of the body, that part will get damaged. So there will be abrasions or pressure source in that area. So you have to avoid that. Well, the mobility aids can be like walking aids, wheelchairs, tricycles, and paddas.
This, I think, if you remember, we had a question.
You'll have to
Pattada, as we say, no?
Pattada is basically a platform. Yeah, it's a platform on which a person can sit, and it has got wheels underneath.
Yes.
So the thing is that person will be able to, because everywhere you cannot take the wheelchair. So in such cases, particularly in the interiors or inside the house, if a person who is requiring wheelchair can easily sit on pattada and can move with the help of those wheels which are underneath the pattada, means it underneath the platform. So it's a very convenient device for
particularly
people.
In perhaps rural areas, in home situations.
In home situations, it is very good. Yeah.
I mean, in rural and urban
the same
areas,
and the thing is that it can be, the person can sit on it, and if it can be fixed to the body with something, if say for example, above knee processes case, if it can be say fixed with the limbs, the person can even jump with it. That is the advantage with it. Well, the walking aids can be monopod, tripod, quadrupod, means walking sticks can be depending upon the stability that is required for walking. Means if the person is requiring it just for the sake of support, in that case it can be monopod stick, which can be used, like you must have seen many elderly persons using it, or sometimes even osteoarthritis cases of knee, means knee osteoarthritis cases you must have seen them using. So those cases monopod stick is good enough. But tripod or quadrupod stick is basically used in the cases where person require balancing and putting lot of weight on this thing. Balance, like for example in the cases of say Aboni processes, when a person is using this thing, if it is monopod maybe it can slip because lot of body weight passes through the processes, and if the particularly if the stump is small, in that case if it is a monopod stick, if it may slip. So in such cases you require either tripod or quadrupod stick, that means it gives more stability while walking. And then there can be crutches like auxiliary crutches, elbow crutches or gutter crutches, depending upon the extent, or you can say the where it is being held. Then there can be walkers. Walkers means they are frames basically with the support of whom the person is able to walk. Then there can be rollators. I am not describing much about the walkers and rollators because I believe it will be covered in other section.
What about a gutter? You were saying
Gutter is basically a type of elbow crutch, you can say, and it has got gutters in the upper part of the crutch, in
I
which
see.
the person, those who are unable to bear weight on the say this thing, those who have got weak elbows or those who are unable to sustain weight on their lower limb fully. So in such cases it is the gutter which supports the forearm.
I see.
We call them forearm gutters. So and at the same time there is one handle to hold it, and then the weight is put on those gutters.
I see.
So the person, even if elbow does not have much power, gutter crutches are of help in those cases.
Okay.
The person will be able to move about. Then the wheelchairs, although it will be covered in other section also, but still I would like to just enumerate the types of them. Like they can be hand propelled when the person is using his own hands to move it. It can be motorized or battery operated when the battery is used and a motor is used for that purpose. Then it can be electronically controlled when it can be electronically controlled when some gadget is being used, some chip is used, or it can be joystick controlled.
In India, in our country, at this point, do we the electronically controlled or the electrical wheelchairs are not so commonly available, or are
no, they are available,
and,
but the
expensive?
thing is, yeah, they are quite expensive. If you see, most of the which are available in India are imported ones. Indian manufacturers are also providing it, but their cost is also not very less. Battery operated wheelchairs are available in India. Alimco is producing one. Then there are other players also in the field.
The South also there.
Yeah, they are providing. So, but the thing is, they are battery operated, and so far their trials are, I think, are quite successful, and they can also be used. Well, then they can be joystick controlled. Then of course they are convenient to use and easy to operate, but at the same time they are costly and difficult to maintain.
Yes.
That's
It's a pity because I think this would also free a lot of people if easier
that's
access
what.
to.
But
outside access is also not there, even if you have. So it is used within generally.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it has the two aspects have to be looked at. One is the cost reduction, and the other is enabling environment to
Enabling,
use such a wheelchair.
correct. Then tricycles are also, of course, they are available in India. They can be hand driven, means when the mechanical force, the person himself is moving, and then secondly motorized. Once again battery operated, or sometimes even the motor fixed, means auto tricycles are also available.
These are in fact one of the most popular aids and equipment that is
appliances
given
required.
out under the ADIP scheme also. I
Yes,
think the
very correct,
tricycle.
very correct.
Yeah.
Because this is the one appliance which is most in demand.
Yeah.
It is because for long distance ambulation, almost you can say 60 to 70% of the persons with locomotor impairment, those who are having lower limb involvements, require a tricycle for long distance ambulation. Well, then there are certain aids and appliances which are being used in activities of daily living, and hopefully this will be covered by in another section when we will talk about the aids and appliances used for the persons with cerebral palsy. So they can be like cerebral palsy chair, they can be commode chair, shower chair, long handled brush, reachers, or you can say universal cuff, or you can say modified utensils, which these are the basically the aids and appliances which are
Yes.
used for this thing.
Activities
And
of daily
yeah,
living.
and one thing in the while concluding my session, I would like to add in my presentation that the persons with locomotor impairments, they need to be given say equitable opportunities. Means they can win races with a smile, provided you give them the smooth
turf.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes, I think that is
You
quite
have to give them-
critical. Actually, we have to, on the one hand, as you said, provide the devices and ensure that the environment is made
Yeah,
accessible.
yeah,
I
that's
think
what.
these two go hand in hand.
Yeah.
You
Hand in
cannot
hand.
Hand in.
look at one in isolation.
Yeah, giving assistive devices alone is not good enough. You give a person a wheelchair, and if he is not able to enter a building,
Yeah.
it is useless for him. That means he will be able to reach the place, but will not be able to get inside. So it is important both the way, give the devices, but at the same time give accessible environment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr.
Yeah,
Chandra.
that
That was
was
indeed
very
very
informative.
comprehensive. I think it covered the entire, range of assistive devices for use of persons with locomotor impairment. We'd like to move on now to discussion on assistive devices for persons with cerebral palsy, but I think before that we'll go into a very short break and we'll come back and continue our discussion in this topic.